So you probably saw the headlines. Every news outlet called the recent Iran peace talks a complete disaster, a total diplomatic failure. But what if that was the entire point? We're about to dig into a really fascinating theory that argues this so-called failure was actually a perfectly executed strategic victory. Right, so how in the world does that work? How can you walk away from the table with absolutely nothing and still call it a win? Well, according to the theory we're exploring today, the real victory wasn't about what happened inside the negotiating room, but about what it allowed to happen everywhere else. Okay, so the talks were held in Islamabad. They went on for 21 grueling hours, and then the American delegation walked out with nothing. The media, of course, called it a massive blunder. But this theory suggests that the first clue to what was really going on is all about who the U.S. sent to the table in the first place. And here it is, the two completely opposite takes. On one side, you have the whole world seeing a diplomatic disaster. But on the other, some are calling it a strategic masterstroke. This theory argues that the failure wasn't a bug, it was the main feature. And it all kicked off with the choice of negotiator. The man sent to the talks was JD Vance. Now, he's widely considered the administration's biggest dove, the guy most likely to want to make a deal. But here's the kicker. Iran had specifically requested him by name. They thought they were getting the most agreeable, most flexible person at the table. And this, right here, is the absolute heart of the theory. The administration needed the entire world to watch its most reasonable guy make a genuine, good faith effort and then get publicly rejected. By sending Vance, nobody could turn around later and say the U.S. sent a hawk just to blow up the talks. The optics of it all were absolutely critical. So the stage was perfectly set. According to this line of thinking, the goal wasn't actually to get Iran to say yes. No. The real goal was to get them to list their demands out loud on the public record for the whole world to hear. And here's what Iran publicly refused to do. They said no to stopping the funding of their proxy groups. They said no to stopping uranium enrichment. And they said no to reopening the Strait of Hormuz without their $2 million crypto toll per ship. And remember, these weren't just quiet rumors or backroom leaks. This was their official, on-the-record stance. And this is where it all clicks into place. Iran's list of refusals wasn't just a tough negotiating position. It was basically a public declaration of their actual foreign policy. Or, in the source's words, it sounded a lot like a confession on the world stage. So, with that confession now on the books, the response was, well, immediate and incredibly decisive. This is where we start to see this strategic payoff, starting with the most important oil choke point on the planet. I mean, just look at the speed of this. The source we're looking at really emphasizes this point. Before JD Vance's plane had even left Pakistani airspace, the countermove was already announced on Truth Social. This wasn't something they spent weeks planning. This was executed in minutes. The U.S. was taking Iran's biggest weapon, control over the strait, and turning it right back against them. And the blockade itself was surgical. The idea wasn't to shut down the world's oil supply, far from it. It was just to shut down Iran. By blocking ships only going to and from Iran while guaranteeing safe passage for everyone else, the U.S. basically broke Iran's economic chokehold on the entire region. The economic effect was instant. 121 empty oil tankers, 61 of them supertankers, immediately changed course for the U.S. With Iran's extortion lane now neutralized, the world just pivoted. This wasn't just about preventing a crisis, it turned into a massive export opportunity for American energy. Okay, let's move on to the second part of this strategy, the nuclear question. Again, the theory argues that the offer made to Iran was never actually designed to be accepted. It was designed to force them to reveal their true intentions. The offer was really a simple test. The U.S. basically said, hey, you can have civilian nuclear power, that's fine, but you have to import the pre-processed fuel, just like most other countries do. This would give them plenty of energy, but it would completely remove any path to a weapon. And Iran's answer? A hard no. They insisted they had to enrich their own uranium. And right there, that refusal tells you the whole story. As the source argues, a nation that just wants energy, they take that deal every time. But a nation that secretly wants a weapon, they insist on enriching their own fuel. By saying no, Iran pretty much broadcasted the world that their goal was the bomb, not the power plant. But the strategic wins weren't just about what was happening on the global stage. The source points to one final outcome, something the media completely missed. A perspective not from a diplomat or a politician, but from someone on the inside. Now, the context for this is just incredible. The Iranian regime had pulled the plug on the country's entire internet, total blackout. And yet, somehow, a single message managed to get out through the Starlink network, and what it said offered a pretty stunning perspective on those failed talks. This quote, wow, this is really the emotional heart of the source's final point. The message claimed that ordinary Iranians were actually relieved that the talks collapsed. Why? Because they don't want a deal that props up the regime. They want the regime to be gone. And so this theory concludes that the West often just misreads the entire situation. While our diplomats are busy trying to cut deals, the people actually living there are hoping for the regime's collapse. So from their perspective, the failed talks weren't a setback at all. They actually aligned with their deepest desire for liberation. Which leaves us with one last question to think about. According to this theory, this negotiation was never about getting a signature on a piece of paper. It was about forcing an adversary onto a public stage to confess their real intentions to the entire world. And maybe, in that kind of negotiation, the biggest victory isn't a deal, but a moment of undeniable clarity.